If you stand on the edge of the Arctic Ocean and look toward the horizon, the ice will often lie to you. This is a fata morgana. The freezing water cools the air directly above it, creating a dense layer that bends the light coming from over the curve of the Earth. To the human eye, distant shapes are projected high into the sky, hovering like impossible structures. This optical trick gave birth to actual ghost stories. In 1931, the SS Beichimo became hopelessly trapped in the pack ice. The crew abandoned her, expecting the ship to sink. Instead, she drifted along the coast of Alaska for nearly 4 decades. Hunters would occasionally spot the Beichimo looming out of the fog, half frozen and entirely empty, sometimes magnified by the mirage into a towering phantom. The ice routinely swallows expeditions like the Italia airship or the doomed 1819 Coppermine party. And to understand exactly how the Arctic breaks the people who travel into it, we have to read the surviving diaries. The physical toll recorded in these logs is staggering. The Coppermine explorers detailed the starvation of the Canadian prairie winter, tracking their slow decline until they were reduced to eating rotting mice and roasting the leather of their own boots. The polar environment operates as a highly efficient predator. It begins by tricking the eyes with floating horizons, proceeds to trap the physical body in the ice, and finally starves the human mind of the inputs it needs to survive. In the early 20th century, explorers ventured into this void wearing heavy layers of mercerized wool, thick canvas, and cavalry twill. They wrapped their feet in boots fashioned from raw reindeer skin. It was bulky, primitive armor designed for a single purpose, keeping frostbite from gnawing off their extremities. But the gear couldn't protect them from the claustrophobia. In 1912, the 6-man northern party of the Scott expedition became stranded on Inexpressible Island. To survive the winter, they carved an ice cave out of a glacier. 6 men lived in a 9 by 12-foot hole for over 6 months, eating seal meat by the light of a blubber lamp. The ceiling of that cave maxed out at 5.5 feet high. None of the men could stand up straight. For half a year, they crawled over one another in absolute soot-stained darkness, their physical world reduced to the size of a modern parking space. While the minus 40-degree temperatures outside will rapidly kill your body, the agonizing confinement required to survive it is what shatters human psychology. Modern researchers have a name for this specific mental collapse: winter over syndrome. It is a highly documented psychological condition triggered entirely by the unique stressors of polar isolation. This chart from a systematic review of Antarctic expeditions shows exactly how the environment attacks the brain. It details a high concentration of reported negative effects stemming from 2 main triggers: the severe sensory deprivation of a featureless white landscape and the complete disruption of the circadian rhythm caused by the endless polar night. When the brain is denied normal sunlight and external variety, the damage cascades. Explorers report acute sleep disturbances, severe depressive symptoms, and a measurable impairment in baseline cognitive function. Rather than acting as a passive backdrop, the tundra operates as a persistent psychological stressor, starving the brain of stimulation until the neural circuitry begins to misfire. To fight off this mental decay, explorers rely on a coping mechanism called imaginative involvement. With the external world completely blanked out, isolated individuals dive aggressively into books or journals, essentially simulating a reality to replace the one they lost. The men trapped on Inexpressible Island carried a single copy of Charles Dickens's David Copperfield. They rationed it, reading exactly 1 chapter aloud every night. That fictional story became the only forward momentum in their lives, a shared hallucination that kept their minds anchored. When that coping mechanism fails, the results are violent. During one early expedition, the claustrophobia drove a crew member into complete paranoia. He abandoned the cramped quarters, hid himself in a deep snowdrift, and waited in the freezing wind with a heavy crowbar to ambush a teammate. When the brain is starved of sensory input for long enough, it manufactures its own reality, and the line between a necessary survival instinct and violent madness practically vanishes. This intersection of sensory deprivation and isolation forms the core of an entire genre of indigenous and modern storytelling known as Arctic eco-Gothic horror. In these narratives, the ice itself feels like an ancient, hostile entity watching the humans trapped upon it. Indigenous literature from the region details the Witago, ancient, ravenous humanoids buried deep in the permafrost. As the climate shifts and the ice thaws, these entities are said to wake up, bringing the horrors of the past up to the surface. You can see the roots of these myths directly in the diaries of stranded explorers. Trapped in the absolute silence of the ice, their brains scrambled for any audio signal, frequently inventing the sound of rhythmic tapping beneath the floorboards or voices calling out from the blizzard. The void of the ice serves a more internal function. The absolute silence acts as a mirror, forcing the brain to project its own hidden horrors into the white space. We like to think our technology has solved this problem, but if you pan away from the historical diaries and look at the modern tundra, you find an environment that remains completely unconquered. This newspaper report outlines the fate of Mold Bay, a key government research station built at the western entrance of the Northwest Passage. The federal government poured millions into the site before walking away in 1997. Today, with cleanup funds completely unaccounted for, the dark two-story complex sits rotting in the snow. It is a multi-million-dollar incubator for toxic mold and buried fuel drums, a structure deemed no longer fit for human habitation. The ice degrades canvas tents and $8 million research complexes with the exact same efficiency. The Arctic's buried secret is that it strips away our technological armor and our social conditioning, proving time and again that the absolute limit of human expansion is the fragility of our own sanity.